Now that we know how to insert some data, we need to figure out how we can update it inside the database. There are two different function calls inside Pymongo that you're going to use to do this. One is update one, and the other is update many. And there's another call I'm going to talk about in another lesson called replace. But for now, let's talk about updating, which updates a document in place in the database. There are two different parameters that you're going to need to remember to use. One is the filter, which filters out which documents you want to update. And the other is an update statement. And the update statement has to have some sort of operator, a dollar operator such as $set, that tells the database how you want to manipulate the document and what field you want to change. So, as a reminder, both of these calls map to the same underlying call inside the database, which is the update command. And if you remember, inside the Mongo shell, there isn't an update one and an update many. There's just an update command. And I'm going to show you how we can understand this better by showing you some of the Pymongo source code at the end of this lesson. All right, so now that we have update one and update many, let's look at those in a small program. We're going to return now to the score collection that we used in some of the earlier lessons, which is in the school database. And if you remember, there's a bunch of documents in this collection that look like this, with a student ID, a type, like exam or homework, and a score. And I just showed one of these documents, but there's a bunch of these documents in the collection. So now we're going to add a reviewer to that. All right, let's look at this program, which is going to update a single document inside the scores collection. Now, there's a function here, add review date using update one, which is going to take a student ID, and then it's going to retrieve the document for that student ID of type homework only from the scores collection right here. And then after it does that, it's going to retrieve the underscore ID. And it's going to do this to make sure that this update hits exactly one document. We know that underscore ID is unique within the collection. So we know that if we update one with an underscore ID set, that we're always going to get one document. And we're going to set it equal to the record ID that came out of the record we just found. And then after that, we're going to update it in the following way. We're going to set the review date to the current date time. Now, you'll notice here that this is a document, and that $set is the operator, and then the value for this $set is the review date and what you want it to be. So essentially the final state of that key value pair. And then it turns out that update one returns a number of matched, so we can print it out, result.matchCount, and you can see that if you look in the Pymongo documentation. And then we're just going to find the document that we just updated, and we're going to print it out again, just so that we know that we actually updated it properly. So let's run that and see what happens. So let's make sure we're calling the right function here. Add review date using update one. There's actually two functions in this file, but we're only going to look at one of them right now. And now we're going to run inside a terminal, Python using update. All right, so what happens? Well, it gets the document here. This is the document that it pulls out. And you can see that it has a student ID 1, which is what we specified. And there's no review date on it. And then after the update one, it has a review date right here. So that worked properly. No problem there. Now, let's update a bunch of documents. So to do that, we're going to change this program slightly. Instead of calling this function right here, which is the add review date using update one, we're going to use this one right here, which adds a review date for all of the documents. And it does this using update many. The filter is empty, so it's going to hit every single document, and it's going to print out the number it matched, and it's not going to print out the final documents in this case because there's a lot of them. So let's change the function. Okay. Now let's go and watch it work. So there we go. It updated using update one and set. In this case, it matched 300 documents. And if we go inside the Mongo shell and we find some documents, we should see that they all have review dates, and they do. So it updated all the documents. All right, so as I said to you before, update one and update both use the same underlying command to the database. How would you know that? Well, you couldn't look inside the Pymongo documentation to find that out because that wouldn't tell you. But if you were curious about how it worked, you could go into the actual source code for Pymongo. I'm going to show you how to navigate that real quickly. So right here, I've gone to GitHub at github.com/mongodb, and I'm just going to type Python into the query to find the Python driver project. There it is. I'm going to enter it. So I want to find the 3.0 branch because in this case, we're not on master yet. We're using this beta version. And if I go in here and I look at Pymongo and I look at everything in the collection class, and we know all these functions are all in the collection class. So I'm just going to look in there. And now I'm just going to search for update 1. All right, there's update 1 right here. And update 1 is a function that takes the self pointer is just the way object-oriented programming works in Python. You can ignore that. The filter, which was the query, and the update operator, and an upsert parameter, which we haven't talked about. And we can see that update 1 is going to make a call to this underscore update function right here with filter, update, upsert, and then false. And if we look at update many right here, we can see that it also makes a call to underscore update. The only difference is there's one more parameter tacked on, which is true, and that defaults to false. That parameter, which is similar to the one you saw in the shell, controls whether the underscore update function will update many documents or just one document. And you can see this is kind of complicated. I mean, compared to having a nice simple function, update one or update many, you'd have to understand the way this parameter works to know whether or not your update is going to update one or many. And again, this is the way the shell works and the way the drivers used to work. But now we've deprecated those functions, and we recommend you use update one and update many. All right, let's have a quiz. In the following code fragment, what is the Python expression in place of xxx to set a new key examiner to be Jones using the set operator? And this is, again, the same scores collection that we've been using before. So you can see there's an xxx missing here. We're calling update 1, and you have to figure out what goes in right there. And you should type it there below.